So I was rolling around my meaningless existence when I went, when did Rick and Morty first come out? The show has been a wild ride. Everyone loves it, or loved it, or uses it to justify a weird exclusionary superiority complex off of a false sense of empowerment based on being able to understand meta-entertainment, which is ironic because the show constantly reminds us that any sense of superiority is demonstrably false, and rooted in egotistic existentialism that, when left unchecked, will inevitably alienate you from everyone you care about.
Don't drag us into your bullshit just because you're losing control.
Overall, it's some pretty good TV, which has also managed the monumental feat of being influential enough to have both shaped and captured the entertainment landscape of the 2010s. It was exactly what it needed to be to push the boundaries of pop culture. Weird enough to be cool and interesting without being too niche or alienating. And the secret to the show's longevity is that it's built on being unique, which it does with this very special combination of sci-fi plus meta plus character plus random ingredient. And because every episode has a unique variation of this flexible style, your favorite episode probably says something about what sticks out to you and what you find interesting. But that's for you to think about and find out. All of this is just preamble for me to talk about my favorite episode, the Season 2 premiere, A Rickle in Time. Here's a TLDR. At the end of Season 1, Rick, Morty, and Summer stop time, because that's a thing that they can do. Season 2 picks up right where they left off, and they start time again. But because they messed with time, they're Schrodingered into living multiple possible timelines at once, which is bad. It's a good sci-fi concept, but Rick and Morty is loaded with those.
Where are my testicles, Summer?
What makes this episode stand out is how it visualizes the concept in this really interesting way that you can only really do on TV. Okay, so imagine you work for the show and you need to figure out how you're going to execute the concept of multiple simultaneous splitting realities that are all real and yet all hypothetical. The simplest way to do it is to not really do it. Just show one version of them and get the audience to imagine parallel realities. Have it be like a ghost thing. But the problem with that is it doesn't help the audience understand what the fuck is happening. So, option 2. To fix that, you could just cut to show the same scene happening over and over again with differences to show that it's a different reality every single time. But that's repetitive and boring. So, option 3. Literally just splitting the screen. Multiple realities all at once, with differences that are visually distinct so you immediately notice them. But to keep things from being too complicated and annoying, they make it a bottle episode set in the garage. And the show trusts you to follow along. It's easy for this to devolve into incomprehensible garbage, but they organized it so it's the perfect balance of trippy and cohesive, where you can see them all at the same time and it still makes sense, like an orchestra. The show's done funky meta stuff before and since, but I don't think they really get as creative as this in terms of how we the audience experience things. But a cool concept can't sustain a show on its own. You also need some good old-fashioned character building. And Rick and Morty as a show only works as well as it does because every episode advances the characters at least a little bit. And this episode is full of character moments. The big one, of course, being Rick spends the whole episode going on and on about how he doesn't care about his grandkids.
Overly sensitive, clingy, hysterical bird brain homunculi.
But in the climax of the episode, he sacrifices himself to save Morty.
I'm okay with this. Be good, Morty. Be better than me.
For all his talk and his brains and ridiculousness, Rick is just a guy.
I'm not okay with this!
Also, it's smart how the episode is designed so that Rick can have his monumental character moment, but still keep the status quo.
But I feel like one of the 64 Ricks, sacrificed himself for me? Maybe? I think? Shut up, Morty. The last time you felt something, we all almost died.
This version of Rick saved his grandson, but that doesn't take away from the mystique of Rick being a nihilistic asshole that may abandon all of them on a whim. It just tells us that, of all the infinite possible realities, there's a version of Rick that would willingly sacrifice himself for Morty. But it's not just Rick that has his character moment. The main story is intersected with a weird-ass B-story that starts as a trip for ice cream and ends with,
I will reach into heaven and yank your screaming dear soul back!
And a big part of this random-ass storyline being good is it saying a lot about Beth, Jerry, and their whole weird-ass dynamic. Beth's pride is ridiculous. She is definitely her father's daughter. She refuses to let a deer that's been hit with bullets and a car die in peace because her fragile horse doctor ego goes on an insane rampage despite the universe telling her not to.
You son of a bitch. You don't stop living until I say so!
It also tells us about Jerry being the meekest man alive, who will also do whatever he can to make his wife feel better. They're both incredibly messed up people, but they have an implausible and unhealthy symbiosis that works for them. and it's all tied together with a bunch of random bits that come out of nowhere and do their thing. No foreshadowing, no explanation, no nothing.
Chris! You killed my gun!
Like good improv. So yeah, the episode has everything that makes Rick and Morty great, but just does it so well. But, you know, that's just what I think.